do a Venom bust. I looked at some references, I guess, of him on Google, and you know, I have my favorite go-to Venom pose, you know, but I think I'm going to try to do something a little different. Now, I should probably pull up the references again because I have not memorized what he looks like. So, of course, we're going to have like the gnarly tongue, but I want him to look kind of like crazy. You know, like neck muscles and stuff. You'll notice that I'm using the Home Depot pencil. This was something that John thought would be kind of cool to use this to draw with because they were like, I don't know, 20 cents at Home Depot when we were like shopping for wall paint. And I was like, you know, that is a good idea because the one thing I have a tendency to do is noodle with my lines, and I get too detailed in some areas. Sometimes that's good, and a lot of times it's not so good. So this makes it so I'm focused only on the big, broad shapes instead of spending a ton of time on, you know, the details. So bear with me. I'm still trying to look at references online and then, you know, come up with the structure. And the thing with using references is sometimes, you know, it starts to become the other person's art or style because you're looking at references. So I'm trying to look at it but not be exact because then it's going to end up looking like I said, another artist's Venom. So I'm trying to figure out how to shape his shoulders and his back and his, you know, his chest, because I do want to have like an indication of his emblem, but you know, I want to make it like a nice little shape instead of it just being kind of a random area where I would spot all the blacks and, you know, make it like a really cool looking shape or something. Then I don't want his shoulders to look kind of tiny and scrawny, so I'm just gonna noodle around a little bit longer until I find the shape I'm looking for. You know, there's like the super thick Venom, and then there's the very roided out, I guess you could say, Venom, kind of very cartoony. And I kind of like the mix between the two. I think that would be my take on it. And you know, the older Venom drawings, he looks more like he's wearing a costume, and then there's the newer stuff which looks more like it's, you know, like part of his skin or hide. I like them both, but I think that sometimes there might be a little too much of that stuff going on. So then again, another balance. I'm going to try to add some of this so that it's more interesting. You know, because if you don't fill up the top part of the paper, it looks kind of weird. kind of abrupt, you know? I think this is ready to ink now. I'm not going to go too crazy with it. I actually prefer it when my lines aren't super tight. I only did the really tight lines for basically his face, so that I don't, you know, put a tooth out of place. And not to mention, I would prefer not using gel pens to fix anything I accidentally ink over, because it looks better when it's just kind of just a paper. Sometimes the paper is like an off-white, and if the gel pen is a different kind of white, then it's gonna look more yellow than it is, you know, actual white. Yep. Okay, so my options for inking today is either these pens that I've been using, or these new brushes that I got, which I actually think would be kind of fun to use for this this quick piece. So I'm probably gonna do this instead. However, there's some green and blue gouache on here, so I gotta wipe it off completely unless I want some blue tinge on this black and white piece. So yeah, look at how absolutely sharp this tip is right here. You can't really see it. Maybe if I do this. So this should be a lot of fun to experiment with this. So I am experimenting, and I'm turning them upside down, adding some water into the pathway for where I want the ink to go, and then just dropping the ink. And so I'm going to go ahead and try that again and see how it looks. It's kind of experimental. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever done this, but you know, it's kind of cool and fun. So I guess we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so I'm using this brush, an oval wash brush, and I'm thinking it fills up, it covers more ground, and it also looks kind of, you know, organic, and I think it doesn't lift as much ink as, let's just say, a different brush, where it feathers out towards the end, and it still looks like it's, you know, very fine strokes, which I actually like how that looks. I don't like it when there's too much ink at the tip of the brush and it's like a harsh edge, I guess is the word I'm looking for, at least with some instances. So if I do it like this and I cover more ground, I can actually take a more fine brush and then use this to kind of do what I did on the inside the mouth and make it look really thin, like multi-liner. It's pretty cool. It takes a lot of practice, I think, with your wrist pressure, because you know you might end up doing too much. So there's like a lot of this right here where it's almost mechanical in a way. So I started using this brush last night and I love how it looks. So I think for the body I'm just going to continue to use this brush, Filbert. And I'm trying to make sure that the way that I ink, it kind of goes the same direction as, let's just say, a consistent movement in a certain direction for everything. So maybe going inwards and outwards, I just want to make sure it looks fairly consistent and not all in one direction or just random, I mean, even though it looks a little random and it's not, I'm not completely planning the direction of the ink, of the strokes. There's still some level of order, I guess you could say. You know what? So this is horizontal, so I think these lines should also be more horizontal. Or strokes, I should say. So I've had to redraw his logo quite a few times already, so I think I'm just going to focus on getting it right before I move on anymore with the inking, because I kept inking. I could easily mess up this part and have to use like a correcting acrylic pen or something. So I'm breaking out all the tools. So this is a Royal and Langnickel. It's a very cheap brush, but it's a flat, and I think because of the texture here, it doesn't look right because there's kind of like a gloss. So I want this to be more matte or like one consistency. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this. As you're gonna see, it actually creates like a consistent, it loads on the paint pretty consistently and it's flat, so it gives it that look, more matte, and it's almost like painting a wall. You want it to be evenly distributed. So there you go. In a way, it's kind of like, I feel like it's taking a shortcut, because as much fun as I was having with these other brushes, I kind of need to get this part done. I'm at the end of my ink jar, so I'm not going to be shy about using it because it's pretty old ink at this point, and I need to open a new jar up. So this is a good way to go ahead and use it, what's left of it. I'm probably gonna have to take a step back to see if I like how this looks, I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up later, but for now, this is pretty good. I'm going to try to move on to his head, and then all the really cool stuff. I'm going to dab some more paint elsewhere so it's not super thick and it's going to take forever to dry. Okay, I need to step away. It's easy to overdo it and completely mess it up. So I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this multiple times in other episodes, but I prefer inking with brushes because of the speed and, well, obviously the aesthetics of it. I love the fluidity of a brush, and I've obviously inked with nibs in the past, and after I do a whole book with a nib, it really hurts my wrist and gives me soreness. So I've started to realize after a few years that using the brush was not only a preference because of how it looks, but also because it allows me to ink and work for longer periods of time because my wrist is not sore. And I also ink with multi-liners, and I love those as well. if I'm really, really pressed for time, I basically I do that because, you know, the dry time is quite good. And yeah, I don't really have to think much. I just have to have a process where I outline, you know, the outline of the shapes that I'm inking, and then I do the fine detail afterwards. So I actually bought a few different types of multi-liners on Amazon. I think it's called Bianyo. Links will be in the description. But I've been using that to ink the interior pages for my comic book Neo Wonderland, and that's what I use for the most part. But there are, you know, areas on the page where using a brush and then like a flat brush and ink is better because of the speed and then how much ground I cover and such, you know, like a few brush strokes. So that's my preference. And you know, I actually, if I, you know, had more time, I would definitely just go with the brush most of the time. And for hard edges, there's times when I could use my really nice liner brush. However, sometimes I just end up using a multi-liner for like really long straight lines, just a ruler, and a multi-liner pen is actually the best way to go ahead and execute that. Or like a perfect circle or an ellipse, I use a multi-liner for that, and then, you know, an ellipse tool. So that's kind of my go-to for doing interior pages. And pinups are a little easier, just kind of, you know, use the brush. I'm never really in that much of a hurry to do a cover or a pinup piece where I have to use, you know, multi-liner pens. Maybe when I'm at a convention or something like that. So when I'm applying screen tones, especially in areas where, you know, it requires a little bit of extra cutting and carefulness with the X-Acto knife, I try to be really slow and meticulous, because otherwise you could accidentally cut into the, you know, the drawing itself, and you see these cut marks, and it doesn't look as, you know, great when you cut too far into the paper. So yeah, his eyes were kind of hard to cut, so I cut a few pieces at a time and then pulled it away, and a few pieces at a time, instead of, like, a lot of times if it's the outer edge of something, I could do it all in one swoop instead of having to cut away at the larger chunks of the screen tones. At first I was trying to make it look like his eyes were shiny and kind of frog-like, and then I realized I didn't really like how it looked, or it was kind of or I didn't, you know, execute it well enough. So I decided I was probably gonna just get rid of it later on. While I prefer not using, you know, the markers for corrections, and especially in really big areas where I'd like to leave the white of the paper to come through, I do like using the POSCA markers for, like, the fine detail. I think looks kind of cool that way and adds, you know, some dimension and detail to the piece. I'm really excited to add, you know, ink splatter towards the bottom of the piece. While it's really fun, it could get pretty messy. So I put down like a tissue paper underneath so that I don't get all my equipment dirty and messy and paint all over it. Even though you could probably peel off some of that ink from the equipment, it's a hassle. So I tried to stay as close to the paper as possible so that it didn't spray all over the place. Plus, I like the variation you get when you're closer to the paper versus like maybe a different type of splatter. And of course, now I get to go in and put in the fine details with my brushes and maybe some of the POSCA markers just to finalize everything and, you know, take a step back and see if there's anything else I want to refine. However, you know, I try not to overdo it and over render, which happens pretty easily towards the end of, you know, my process. It's a lot of fun. As always, you guys, thanks for hanging out with me. And until next time, have a wonderful holiday and, you know, Merry Christmas and, you know, Happy New Year if I don't see you sooner. Alrighty. Later.